It's time for the chip race.
For our strategy segment this week, I want to welcome back to the show UK IPT Cork champion, four-time APT Player of the Year and recent runner-up in the WSOP Milly Maker, Sam Razavi. Welcome back, Sam.
Guten Tag. How's it going?
Hi, Sam.
Great to have you back, Sam. Well, firstly, when you were on the show last time round, I remember very distinctly you pledged to us that you were going to give winning a bracelet a real go. I think maybe the APT had gotten in the way a few years. Did you realistically think you were going to have a run like this right away?
Definitely not, for sure. I've always had a few semi-deep runs at the World Series, but you just never know. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't, but I never had a deep run straight off the bat. It's usually taken a couple of weeks of tilt before I've got there, so...
Well, onto the hand in question, Sam. I guess that's what we're all waiting with bated breath for here. I think I'm right in saying there's about 25, 26 left. So I'm going to guess you're maybe eight-handed on whatever table you're at. You're playing about 20 big blinds, maybe, a blind or two north or south of that. You open to 100k at big blind 50 off about $1 million. The big blind defends, which I guess is the most likely defend. You have ace 10 suited here, so you have a hand that you should be opening, of course. It's got some blockers, it's suited, it plays well against a flatting range, certainly plays very well against a big blind flatting range, so there's lots of ways you can win this pot. You can't really afford to start letting these types of hands go, I think, when you're this deep and this stack, even though, of course, with the shorter stack, you will want to tighten up a little bit. The flop comes down Jack of diamonds, 3 of diamonds, 3 of clubs. So you, with the ace 10 of diamonds, have a very nice looking hand. You got the flush draw and the over card. You fire 155k into about 275k. And your opponent calls. Now, I want to stop things there and maybe turn to Dara and just ask Dara, what do you make of this so far, maybe both the pre-flop open and the c-bet?
I think the pre-flop open is fine. Obviously, we should be tightening up a bit, but this is the type of hand we should still go on opening. It's got a blocker, flops well. It's certainly strong enough to open. On the flop, the flop is interesting because it's basically a very hard flop to hit. Apart from the flush draws, there are no draws there. Both players don't have a lot of 3x in their range. So whoever was ahead pre-flop is likely to be ahead. In those cases, I think the best strategy to have is to c-bet 100% of the time, but to use a really small sizing. So Sam's sizing is on the big side. That will obviously put pressure on some hands that might not fold to the smaller sizing. But the reality is that most of his hands that we're trying to get him to fold just have nothing on this board, and they should be folding to a smaller sizing as well. He's not going to fold a jack to a bigger sizing. He's certainly not folding a 3 if he happens to have a 3. So I don't think there's any great reason to use the bigger sizing. So
with Dara's analysis in mind there, Sam, do you like the change in shift maybe to considering a sort of a 25-30% sizing over the sizing you went for? Or in game, did you feel like there were certain dynamics, or like Dara said, there is a bigger range of hands you can certainly get to stop defending now by going for the bigger sizing? And did you feel like that was the kind of pressure you needed to maybe leverage against your opponent so deep in a big MTT?
Yeah, I guess part of it is given kind of an awkward stack size, because I noticed throughout the series there's this new sort of trend to really pounce on very small c-bets. So part of that thinking is, I'm probably going with the hand anyway if something happens. But if I bet slightly on the bigger side, it takes away that temptation or the tendency to try and make a move against me. But I guess...
What kind of hands would you be worried about making the move?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I guess I'm going with the hand anyway.
Yeah, if we think he might take a hand like King, Queen, maybe with 1 diamond, we're perfectly happy to get it in against that hand, I think. So we should give him enough rope if he wants to do that.
Yeah. I think looking in hindsight, I should definitely bet smaller on the flop. I'm not sure about checking behind to give up the lead. What do you think about that?
No, I would never check behind here. Even if I had a hand which had absolutely nothing, I would still bet because I'd expect him to have to give up a lot of the time because it's just so hard for him to hit this board.
Yeah.
Well, then on to the turn, a pretty blanky turn, but of course our opponent has called, so we're led to believe he has at least something here. 6 of spades comes and the action goes check, check. I think this is probably the least controversial street because I don't think we should ever really be betting here once he checks to us. I think it's probably a hand that can improve. We can hit an ace, we can hit a diamond. If he's got sticky on jack 3-3 on the flop, a huge amount of that range is going to be sticky again. He obviously can have a 3. He's probably the only person who can have a 3x in his range. And, some of his jacks are just not going to go away yet. Although maybe you could set up another barrel to maybe get him off a jack by the river. That's an option. But having gone for the bigger sizing, I think we've maybe less room to do that.
I think just as a footnote, part of the problem with betting the big sizing on the flop is that we do kind of narrow the range to hands which are not going to give up on a blank turn. Whereas if we had fired small on the flop, we could potentially fire a bigger bet on the turn and now get him to fold out some hands. But because we've essentially narrowed his range to presumably pretty strong hands because of our sizing on the flop, yeah, we pretty much have to check behind now.
Yeah, that's a good point actually as well. That's probably also part of the reason why one should probably bet smaller on the flop, is to get, some random clever float to get a little bit more cash in the pot anyway.
Exactly, and that's the point. Like, sometimes players think that they want to narrow the range in the flop, but really we want him to continue with a reasonably wide range in the flop, because then we can pounce on the turn if he's just called.
Okay, so going to the river, we see the King of Spades. Now, that's obviously a card that can smash your range, all right. He checks, and now you're presented with a situation where you can check back, maybe pray for a weaker flush draw and hope your showdown is good, or you can go for the really balls out big bluff for the majority of your remaining stack. And in the end, that is exactly what you did, Sam. You decided to go for a 425k bet into about 595k, something just north of 70%. It's certainly a meaningful bet. It's certainly a bet that is representative of either maybe an overpair. You might play aces this way. You might play ace king this way. You might even play queens this way, perhaps. I'm not sure. But it's certainly telling the story to him that I have a king and I really want you to call with your jack. And I suppose the flip side of that is you're hoping, because it's a bluff in this instance, that he reads the situation for that and ends up folding his jack, making, I guess, what would be a big fold. Sam, first of all, what was your logic? Have I sort of summed it up there, or was there any other dynamical stuff at work because of maybe the time and place you were in? World Series, 3 tables left, million up top.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, but you pretty much summed up. I think I got pretty lucky to specifically hit a king on the river, because I'm assuming once he scored the flop, I'm putting him on. Yeah, he might have a weaker flush draw. I don't know if he check raises that and tries to get it in himself. So maybe part of that a discount, because he does have me 2-1, I think. So I've narrowed it down to like a jack. Okay, I've got 110 in my hand. So if I'm thinking he's got something like queen jack, he's just snapping me off on the river. He could have king jack, I guess. But the fact that it's a king, I'm obviously repping the obvious ace king or better. So I just thought, I really have to go for it. And I don't know whether it's good or bad, actually, which is why I chose this particular hand, because I know that these days players are getting very, very sticky. It's hard to make people fold like things, any pair, and it's just hard to make people fold pairs these days. And I know it's risky me firing the river like that, but I think he can give me credit for ace king. I don't think he can give me credit for like an overpair. So the fact that I check behind and then bet the river, I think I can credibly rep ace king, king queen even, and get him to fold the jack. But yeah, I think I got lucky with the river. I guess I give up. I can't represent anything, like if I'm not following through on the turn. So I guess it's just a lucky king.
Yeah, I think the king is a good card for us, obviously, on the river, because if we have a c-betting strategy of close to 100% on the flop, then we are going to c-bet all of our king X, and he's actually going to give up with a lot of his king X. So it's not a great river card for him. In every spot, like if we're trying to be balanced, we need to find some bluffs. Now, as a general rule, missed flush draws usually don't make good bluffs because they block the opponent's flush draws, which we're hoping that they're giving up with. But the problem is that on this particular board and on this run out, it's actually very hard to find bluffs, period, for us, because there are not too many hands. There's no straight draw that misses. There are no other draws apart from the flush draw that misses. So I think actually this is a pretty good candidate to bluff. Having the ace is really good because it blocks his ace jack, his ace king, his ace 3. Even having the 10 is kind of useful because it blocks jack 10, which is another jack that he might have at a higher frequency than some of his other jack X. So having got here in this way, I actually like the decision to bluff, and I think it is a good bluff.
Yeah, and I really like the sizing as well. I think the decision to bluff combined with that 3/4 really is the right amount of pressure, if you like. You obviously have a few bluffs in there. This happens to be one of them. But you have a lot of value hands. You have your ace king. You might even play ace jack this way, going for thin value, because it does look pretty face up once he checks the river that he has jack X. He might even try and bluff himself with a missed flush draw. With that in mind, I really like the 2/3 to 3/4. I think it's exactly the right amount.
The other thing is, from his perspective, like if he calls all of his jack X in the spot, that's just far too stationary, unless he believes that we're just insanely over bluffing. And actually, it's hard to find bluffs for us on this board, so he has no reason to think we are over bluffing. So he actually has to fold quite a lot of his jack X. I think he probably has to fold his queen jack. That would make a bad call. He probably should be calling ace jack some or all of the time. Not just that it's stronger than queen jack, but it also blocks our strong hands like ace king and ace jack itself.
Well, a fascinating hand, Sam. I got to say, I really enjoyed getting the mind working on that one. And thank you, Dara, for your analysis. It was a Milly Maker tournament. You didn't quite make a milli, but you made 3/4 of a milli. Not too shabby for 4 days' work.
Yeah, not too bad. We'll take it. We'll add it to the pile.
Well, I do remember your stack of Benjamins on your coffee table in your suite. That was the right amount of obnoxious.
Yeah, long gone now. That's the grind.